Hey everyone, welcome back to World Drum Club. I'm Kalani Das, your host and teacher, and I've been getting a lot of questions lately about how to help other people play music or how to play music with other people. And so I want to cover a few things about how to do that. And I realize that now is a fairly tumultuous time in our society in the US, also around the world. There's a lot going on. So I'm going to leave it up to you to draw some parallels between what I'm talking about in terms of music with outside of music, whether that's politics, family matters, friends, relatives. My goal here is to give you some ideas about how you can communicate, be an effective member of a community, whether that's your family or even a one-on-one relationship, personal relationship, or out in the world doing whatever you do from whatever perspective you're doing it from. So I will be giving you some hints. This is not a political talk. It's a talk to relate to how musical techniques, and I believe music has a lot to teach us about how to relate, because I believe music is all about relationships and life is all about relationships, and the quality of your life is really, it rests a lot on the quality of the relationships that you create in your life, because those relationships dictate to a large degree how you experience life and how you feel. And I've often said the quality of your life is directly impacted by the quality of your emotions or your feelings throughout your life, right? It's not what you do. It's not what happens to you. It's not all the, how much stuff you accumulate that really measures the quality of your life. Those are things that can relate to how you experience your life and how, therefore, you feel about your life. But at the end of the day, when you look back on your life, you're going to be remembering how you felt at different places. And you can check that statement right now for validity. That's what I would assert, but you can assess whether you believe that. I believe that when we think back on our lives, what we think about is when we felt certain ways, whether we were sad, angry, excited, elated, overjoyed, loving, whatever that feeling is going to be the anchor of your memories of your life. You could disagree, that's fine, but that's what I think. And I think if you think back about your own life, you'll find that that's largely the case. Anyway, here's some things that you can do to connect more with whatever relationships you have and shape those relationships in different ways. So I've talked about this before in terms of music facilitation, but I want to relate this more to the bigger picture. So let's say whatever it is, I would assert that it all starts with paying attention. And I talk about this a lot in my other channel, the Evolve channel, where it's really a mindfulness channel. It has nothing to do with music, but it's related. And I think it all starts with paying attention, or what I call using our senses to have a sensational life. And yes, that is a play on words, but I really believe that if you want to have a sensational life, you've got to tap into your senses, tune into your senses, however many of them you have. And you might have all of the typical senses, you might have fewer than that, and that's okay. Whatever you have available to you, whatever you can see, touch, taste, smell, feel, all that stuff, that's where your life is really happening. Where is it not happening, but where does it seem to happen a lot? Our imagination, your thinking. And lots of people have talked about the slippery slope of overthinking, perseverative thinking, whatever name you want to give it, but being in your head, right? You've talked about, we've heard a lot of people talk about getting out of your head and into your heart, or out of your head and into your body. And that's really what that is speaking to. So tuning into your senses. How does that relate in a musical experience? Well, before you can decide what to do musically, you need to see what is happening, what's there already. And in order to do that, you have to clear yourself, you have to clear your mind of expectations, of biases, of preconceptions, of agendas, of all that stuff, and try to approach any situation from a neutral perspective, first of all, and without any agenda and without any biases. And that's hard to do, but that's what needs to be done. If you really want to make and create an authentic experience that's rooted in the moment, with whoever's there, with whatever's happening. So that means objectively observing what you hear, what you see, and all the rest of that stuff. From there, then we can act in an authentic way, in an informed way, right? If we're not listening and paying attention and really being unbiased, not taking sides, not having an agenda, not thinking about the next thing that we want to do. If we can do that, if we can really be a great observer, and I'll use the word have an objective experience, look for empirical evidence of things, meaning things that we can see, we can measure, we can actually are right there. Not put spin on it, not characterize things. Because characterizations are always coming from us, right? Not from the thing that is there. So does that make sense? Hopefully it does. All right, so that's number one, and I'm just going to call that listening because we're talking about music right now. Certainly applies to other senses, but let's just keep it simple. So first, number one, listen. And that goes for relationships too. If you sit down with somebody, you got an issue, listen. Gather information. Don't argue, don't push back. You can make your case, but the first thing is listen. What's happening musically? What do I hear? Now, from there, once you've assessed, once you've gathered the information, to do that, I would categorize that act as being a good observer. Then you can take some action. And what do you want to do? Do you want to add to and support what's happening? Or do you want to redirect and change or diminish what's happening? And you can do that with a couple different techniques. One of the techniques we talk about in music is called grounding. And grounding is a way of helping to organize and stabilize and support something that's there. Now, of course, just going back to what I just talked about, in order to do that, you have to know what is there, right? Which relates to the first point of listening. Once you've gathered that, you can, for example, play a steady beat to something somebody's already doing. You can just ground it, we call, right? In a steady rhythm, thump, 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 and whatever's happening is happening on top of that. Another thing you can do is you can, what we call synchronizing. Some people might call this mirroring or shadowing or doubling, and that all means doing the same thing. Basically, adding to that voice, let's call it, whether that's a rhythm or whatever it is, or an actual voice or message, you can repeat it. And we see that a lot, actually, just to go out, talk about social media, retweeting, messaging, sending, copying, pasting. All that stuff is a way of repeating and adding to a certain message, if you will. So what that looks like musically is just playing the same thing as somebody else or a group of people. And when you do that, you literally increase the volume and the presence of that thing. And that becomes what we call a more salient feature of that particular happening or experience. So that's one thing you can do also. If you wanted to not do that, if you want to do the opposite of that, then you can use some techniques that we would call redirection techniques, breaking things apart by playing something that is specifically not in alignment or supportive of that thing. So, presenting an alternative perspective, if you will, you can then do that. And that would have the effect of breaking apart, breaking down, de-emphasizing, reducing the influence and presence of certain elements or certain themes in a piece of music. We're talking about music right now. So to do that, you have to listen, because you have to know what you're not going to do, right? So that comes into play. All right, so those are two ways that we can shape a piece of music, and both of those ways require musical skill to do. It's, to match somebody else's playing, I have to be able to listen, determine what they're doing, and then be able to do it and synchronize with that. So I have to be skilled musically. Same thing if I'm not going to be playing with somebody. Maybe it doesn't require so much skill, but I have to make sure I'm not playing with that person. And we have a tendency, actually, as humans, to join together with whatever's happening because it's actually easier than not joining with it. It takes more effort in some ways to play something that is creating tension And tension is just forces working in opposition to one another. It actually takes a little more effort to do that because our natural tendency is that kind of flocking or herd mentality to just join in. Why is that the case? Well, it all, it goes back to safety in numbers, protecting ourselves by just kind of doing whatever most people are doing and betting that that's probably going to help save us from some danger out there, right? Whatever that is. So I'm just saying that that's our tendency. Obviously, a lot of people these days are not doing that. But we still have different groups of people that are doing a lot of the same things. And you might have that musically if you're playing. I actually was doing some coaching for some facilitators a while back, and they were asking me, what do you do when you have a subgroup, let's say of a group drumming session? What do you do when you have some people that are pulling it in one direction and some people pulling it in another direction? And that really is kind of a emblematic of a kind of a power struggle, right? And, my answer is basically, well, it depends on what your role is and, where you stand and what you think is going to be better for the group to ultimately do. That depends on a lot of other factors. It's not like if some people want to change things, that's bad, right? Sometimes change is what's needed. Sometimes change is good. Sometimes it can be sharing time back and forth or breaking the group apart completely. And, that's okay too. All of that happens. It can be compromise. It can be not compromise, but in order to in order to serve the community, excuse me, you would need to have certain skills and able to facilitate that process. All right. So I don't want this to be a hugely long video, but I do want to say that there are lots and lots of music-based techniques that you could employ in your music, but also in your daily interactions with individuals in person and online, and your interaction with the greater community, what you want to do. Again, I think it all starts with paying attention and listening, and this is really important. Having an unbiased view of things that is really, uncolored by our precepts and expectations. And that, my friends, is really one of the hardest things that you're going to do. It takes a lot to, like I say, put yourself in somebody else's shoes, look at something from somebody else's perspective. I try my best to not get rooted in a certain perspective. Let's just use some visual analogies right now, or visual examples. It starts with a viewpoint, right? A viewpoint is a certain way of looking at something. It's a viewpoint, right? And you can go look at something from different viewpoints, right? What you experience from a different viewpoint is a different perspective, right? And we say, well, what's your perspective? What's your perspective? And we can still remain somewhat flexible in our viewpoints, right? Walk around something. And it gets a little more formalized when we talk about a perspective, because people tend to hang out in a certain area where they see things from a certain perspective. If you never leave that area, you're not going to see the other perspective, right? Because you're not going to see the other viewpoint. Does that make sense? The thing we want to avoid is staying there permanently. And we call that taking a stand or taking a position, right? If I take a position, that means I'm not moving around that object anymore. That means I'm not going to go to a different perspective because I'm stuck in my position, right? I'm staying there. Does that make sense? So viewpoints, yeah, lots of those. Perspectives, yeah, there's a few of those too. Position is where I say, no, I'm not moving from here. This is my position. But now I can't see. And you can take a position on something, but then you have to remember that you're not seeing something from another perspective or another viewpoint. All right? I hope that makes sense. I'm not saying you should or shouldn't do. I'm not giving you shoulds and shouldn'ts right now. I'm just saying that this is kind of what happens a lot of the time. So why did I bring that up? I brought it up so that you and I can keep that in mind and check ourselves to make sure that we're not stuck in a position. That we occasionally, even if we have our position, we can still have it and we can still leave it. Doesn't mean we lose it, but we can venture out around something, maybe look at it from the other perspective and the other viewpoints. I think sometimes we feel like that we're going to lose our position, or our position's not as valuable if we don't stay there. And I don't think that's the case. What do you think? Do you think it's okay to leave your position and go look at another viewpoint, get some other perspectives, or not? And I think doing that as a musician and as a member of society is a great thing to do. You might learn something, and I think at the very least, extending that kind of willingness to visit somebody else's viewpoint or perspective or position, just go visit them. Hang out for a second over in somebody else's spot. And that, in a metaphorical sense, around the circle, let's say we're talking about a community drumming event, getting up out of your seat, going down and walking around, standing in a different place. You hear things differently. You see things differently. You might learn why other people are having the experience they're having. It's just a suggestion. All right, I hope this all makes sense. I'm going to wrap up this video now. There's lots we could talk about, but I hope this has been helpful. If you have any more kind and helpful comments for our World Drum Club community members and visitors, leave them down below. And as always, you can connect with me more at patreon.com/Kalani. I wish you all well from whatever positions you're standing in right now, whatever viewpoints you enjoy and take. I'll see you all in a future video. Thanks for watching.